Welcome back. Big news. Canada, Mexico, and the United States. A lot of things going on. Canada's going socialist. The United States is full-fledged going towards capitalism. And Mexico's getting pulled in all directions, whether it's China, the US, the globalists. Let's get into it. I think the first story we got is about Mark Carney. I got my producer over here. This is my first time in the new studio, so if there is any hiccups with audio or visual, let me know and I'll do my best to fix it, I guess.
Yes. Hello, I'm Nat. So from Mario Celaya, if you don't follow him, go follow him, Mario at Mario for the North. He says Carney is lying. He is telling you we have the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7. What he's doing is using our pensions, the CPP and QPP, and calling it an asset. It's a liability. They have to pay that out to us. It's our asset, their liability.
Okay, yeah, and no other country in the world calculates their economy like this, just Canada. Canada's calculating their new budget they just released in the same way, trying to calculate spending as investments. And the investments they're making are in the wrong industries, and it's a fast track towards socialism rather than getting private investment. They're trying to have the government fund everything. Let's go into it.
I'm going to tell you about the biggest lie and the biggest scam perpetuated by the federal government. It has everything to do with the budget and what they're telling you. They're trying to tell you that Canada has the lowest net debt, or they're saying debt to GDP ratio. But the key is in the word net. Do you know what net debt means? They're taking our debt and they're deducting assets. The assets that they're deducting, your Canada pension plan and Quebec's pension plan. They took those two things, which are combined to be almost $800 billion, and they reduced it, and they're saying, hey, we have the lowest net debt. Here's the problem. That pension plan, that within itself is a liability. That's money that is there to pay out for your pensions. That's not an asset. It's literally a liability. The government is allowed to use 10 to 15% of it, I believe, to pay down government bonds, issue those bonds, so it makes their debt cheaper. They can't go beyond that threshold. But when they're telling you that, we're doing so well, it's a lie. A true measure should look like this, where Canada's debt ranking, not net debt, debt ranking falls from the best in G7, like Mark Carney's telling us, to the 7th worst in 32 countries. This was published last year, and it said, ignore Ottawa's talking points. Canada is a highly indebted country. The study that was done was absolutely phenomenal. You want to know why? Because it doesn't have any of this financial engineering nonsense. Because the truth is,
that's good.
We have
and that's the key point there. This is financial engineering. The Canadian government is all about financial engineering, hiding the actual assets of the country, hiding the actual debt, playing one off the other and telling the Canadian people everything is good while the Canadian economy falls apart. It's almost like he's trying to collapse the Canadian economy intentionally. This has been the same plan for the last 10 years. We had Justin Trudeau in there, overspending, increasing the national debt, calling debt investment. Now what do we have? Mark Carney not only doing more of the same, but doing it instead of $45 billion up to almost $80 billion and increasing almost every year. Okay, let's go into the next story we have here, and I think it's about Alberta and Alberta's premier. This issue is starting to really heat up. The Alberta separatist movement is really starting to get legs under it, especially since it's rumored that Mark Carney may get a majority government by possibly Friday or early next week. He has conservative MPs abandoning the Conservative Party, coming over to the Liberal Party. Are there deals being made behind the scenes? I don't know, but this is not what the Canadian people voted for. Mark Carney and the Canadian government know the Alberta separatist movement is a real thing, especially if he gets a majority government. What they're going to try to do is within Alberta's legislation, they're able to have votes for their MPs or different candidates based upon how many signatures they have. They're trying to throw a monkey wrench into the Alberta political system by kind of having re-elections for a lot of these candidates, a lot of people that are supporting the separatist movement. Let's see what Daniel Smith has to say here.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not meant to overthrow and topple governments midterm. Normally what happens is you wait for a general election to be able to have the record of government tested, and that will be a time that we'll be able to have that discussion. So I don't believe that the recall petitions have been entered to in good faith. That being said, Mr. Speaker, there is no legislation on the table at the moment to make any changes. So the members are going to wait and see if any of these petitions end up getting the number of signatures, and then we'll deal with it at that time. Well, Mr. Speaker, it's not.
Yeah, and if we can read this tweet, comes from a liberal as well, and it's saying that these her campaigns are hinting at legislation. She's not hinting at anything. She said they'll go forward as the law says, and this is the good thing about Danielle Smith. She's a straight talker, and that's why Albertans kind of love her. If the Alberta separatist movement's going to go forward, they're going to need her to support it, and hopefully Pierre Poilievre gets on board too. He's kind of in a bind because he wants to run for prime minister, although his review's coming up, and if he has 2 to 3 MPs leaving the Conservative Party, there is a rumor they're going to have to find a new leader. If that's the case, the Conservative movement in Canada, I don't think there's much hope for it because there's nobody to replace Pierre Poilievre. He's the perfect match for Canada. Just a little bit of populism, but can still kind of have broad appeal to mass Canadians. Okay, what do we got here with First Nations?
From Ryan Gertison, a First Nations group wants to claim title to the entire city of Kamloops, other municipalities, and some Peak ski resort in order to stop a mine expansion. But let's keep reading those land acknowledgements.
Okay, yeah, this is going into what happened recently in Richmond. They set a precedent taking private property away from Canadian citizens and giving it back to Aboriginal groups. They're starting to pop up dozens of cases across Canada. This is the most recent. This is a ban in Kamloops. They're actually claiming the entire city of Kamloops is theirs. If this precedent is set by Richmond and then kind of reset by the city of Kamloops, and they actually give any portion of the city of Kamloops back to this ban, it's going to mean the end of private property rights in Canada. You will own nothing and you will be happy. I think this was the plan all along. Canada and the Canadian PMs are going along with UN law. So this is between the UN and the Canadian government, and this looks like it was the plan to take private property rights away from Canadians.
There are growing calls for clarity and transparency for British Columbians around all notices of civil claim filed against the province by First Nations claiming title. Keith Baldry joins us with more on this. Keith, this has become a big issue, particularly over areas that include private property.
Yeah, ever since the Cowichan decision blew up, literally, this has been in the news and raising concerns about what else is flying below the radar here. Is that the only case? Today, independent MLA Eleanor Sturkle releasing another civil claim, this one involving Interior First Nations, that's claiming the entire city of Kamloops, other municipalities, the Sun Peaks ski resort, all in a bid to stop the expansion of the Ajax mine. Here's Eleanor Sturkle saying it's incumbent upon the government to find out what else is flying under the radar out there. And Minister responsible Spencer Chandler Herbert says the government is opposing this claim and is insisting private property rights must be upheld.
The government needs to do more to engage with the public so that they understand the possibility of what consequences could exist from this type of litigation. First Nations have the right to bring forward these claims and to file these claims of title, but the government has a responsibility to ensure the people who it is mandated to serve are well informed of the situation and have an opportunity, if possible, to participate in that litigation.
The province is clear. Private property in any case in this province, it's our view that it needs to be protected, and it's our view that we stand up for it. We're doing that in the...
And yeah, it does need to be protected. The problem is David Eby in British Columbia is not protecting private property rights of Canadians. He's actually helped setting the precedents that could take private property rights away from all Canadians. And if that precedent is set in Canada, you better be sure other countries are going to follow. Okay, let's finish this clip up real quick.
The Cowichan case, and we'll do that in every case. We also fulfill our obligations to acknowledge rights and title for Indigenous nations and work to do both.
Keith, I'm sure the Kamloops court action is a bit of a surprise to a lot of people. How long has that been going on?
Yeah, here's another parallel to the Cowichan situation, because Cowichan one dates back as far as 2014. This one today, unearthed by Eleanor Sturkle, dates back almost 10 years to 2016. So again, the question is, how many other claims are similar to this that are circulating around the justice system, and how many other municipalities may be involved, and how many, if any, private landholders are going to be involved?
No doubt we need those answers sooner rather than later. Keith, thank you.
And it's an absolute shame what's happening here. After the precedent was set in Richmond, BC, the city council began to set out notices to a lot of different Richmond landowners that their property was in jeopardy. Now it's spreading to Kamloops. If you look at a map of BC, every single square inch of BC is claimed by one Aboriginal tribe or another. Some areas are actually claimed by up to 3 or 4 tribes with overlapping land claims. I believe what happened in Richmond, one band actually won that claim, and now another band is claiming it's theirs. You're also having Aboriginal tribes from the United States of America claiming that they own parts of Canada. So Canada could very well become the 51st state, but not because of Donald Trump, but because of Aboriginal claims of United States tribes. Okay, let's continue to go here. I got quite a few stories, so I'm going to kind of rapid fire. There's a lot of clips today. Why don't you read this one out here?
From CAT Canada, a member of Canadian Youth Climate Assembly wants the government to mandate long-term support for climate-induced trauma. She wants in-person and online safe spaces for climate and mental health, just what every Canadian needs right now, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah, and this is why the youth of Canada have absolutely no hope. They don't know how to stand up for themselves. They stand up for themselves saying they've been victimized not only by the government, but by the climate and everything else. They need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and stop complaining. Now, this isn't all Canadians, but this is a lot of female Canadians, a lot of the people that have bought into this LGBTQ bullshit in Canada. The men of Canada, it's time for them to step up, tell the government to get their ducks in line and that private property rights aren't to go away, and they need to stop investing in this green climate change scam. This green climate change scam is huge, especially in this new budget. Mark Carney is just doubling and tripling down, but he's calling one thing another. Rather than having carbon taxes, now he wants to invest in carbon capture. This is not going to float the Canadian economy. The United States is headed in one direction, and it seems to be working. Canada seems to be falling off a cliff, and they're not willing to change their value set that they have. If you've ever read Mark Carney's book called Values, everything's kind of laid out in there in the big scheme and plan for Canada to have it kind of self-destruct.
We urge parliamentarians to mandate and support the provision of continued and long-term mental health resources across provinces and territories so that all Canadians can access care from climate-induced trauma, distress, and duress. We want to see an emphasis on community wellness and making resources available virtually and in person to allow all Canadians to stay connected. Such resources include hotlines, call and text, for individuals struggling due to the effects of climate change, websites with related resources, and support groups where people can share their own experiences. We urge parliamentarians.
Yeah, and Canada's all on board with this. They want to get the young invested in climate change, as youth around the world have kind of changed their opinions ever since Donald Trump eerily gave the speech in front of the UN. A lot of countries are kind of turning their back on this climate scam and this climate agenda. But as we know, the UN is trying to double down and reinvest and get youth groups just like this to kind of stand up on public TV, give propaganda, and get the youth invested in this so they can continue on with the countries like Canada that aren't waking up to the foregone corruption that is going on in Canada right now. Okay, we got one more story on Canada, then we're going to start moving towards US and Mexican politics. There is a big protest potentially ramping up this weekend in Mexico. We're going to get into that, but first, let's get into the next story.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Canada quietly clears cloned meat to be sold.
Yeah, let's read a little bit about this one. I hadn't actually read the whole article. I seen the headline. I said this has to be interesting. So
Canadians could soon be eating products derived from cloned animals without even knowing it. Health Canada has quietly moved to lift long-standing restrictions on foods derived from cloned cattle and swine, removing them from the country's novel foods list, the category that requires pre-market safety reviews and public disclosure. Once implemented, the change means cloned animal products could enter the food supply without labels, announcements, or public notifications.
And that's the thing. And this is what I had read in other articles. So I was wanting to see if they kind of clarified that. They're trying to sell this cloned meat as normal meat. They don't want to have to label it. They don't want the general public even knowing what they're eating. I'm more than willing to guess that Bill Gates is heavily invested in the Canadian food supply, just like he is the American. Okay, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, it's insane, but I'm not surprised that they would see that as the only solution. And again, what are the checks and balances? Where is the consent of the people to be able to do that?
Well, we've also been covering what's been going on in Denmark lately, and what they've been doing in Denmark is absolutely a travesty. They have been poisoning these cows legally, telling farmers they're having to force feed their cows chemicals so they don't have gas, so they don't burp, so they don't have flatulence. And what farmers are reporting are mass casualties amongst their cattle. So if they can't get rid of them one way, they're going to get rid of them another way. And what they want to do is replace normal, healthy cows with vaccinated cows and with cloned meat. Okay, let's go into the EU here. And this one was pretty interesting. This was Ursula von der Leyen giving a speech how the EU is free and people aren't going to be arrested. As soon as she says that, somebody in the crowd actually gets arrested for protesting.
Yeah, so from Basel the Great, EU President Ursula von der Leyen told a crowd of protesters what they should be grateful for being free in the EU, unlike in Russia where you are arrested for protesting, and at that very moment a man was arrested for protesting.
Thank you very much for receiving me. And first of all, to those who scream and yell here so loud, they can be happy that they are in a free country like Finland, where the free speech is a right, where they have not any restrictions. If they would be in Moscow, they would be in jail in 2 minutes. Thank God we have a democracy. Thank God we have free speech. We can.
Yeah, and this is very interesting because she's saying you're not going to get arrested. You can say whatever you want as they're literally arresting this man. This is like everything every other EU politician does. They talk out both sides of the mouth, saying we're not censoring people, we're not arresting you for memes, we're not arresting you for free speech. But there have been over 12,000 arrests in England alone. Ursula von der Leyen needs to retire like Nancy Pelosi will soon be doing. We're going to go into that story about Nancy Pelosi in just a little bit. It looks like she's not going to be running for another term. The question is, has she actually transferred her power over to somebody else in the Democratic Party? And I don't really think she has. Her ace in the hole was Gavin Newsom, and he hasn't really consolidated power around himself within the Democratic movement quite yet. Okay, let's go into read the headline here for me.
From Mario Nawfal, now your favorite person.
If you don't know Mario Nawfal, he is absolutely amazing. His X account is probably the best on X. I tend to tag him more than anybody else, and that's saying a lot because I didn't like him, and I didn't like him for a long time. He's won me over with his work ethic and the stories he seems to be pulling. He also has a YouTube station where he has really good interviews.
So he says, the man who built the web just predicted its collapse. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who literally invented the internet, just warned that AI might nuke the ad economy and that keeps it alive. His logic is brutal. If large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini are the ones quote-unquote reading websites to summarize them for humans, no one's actually seeing the ads. No eyeballs equals no clicks equals no cash. If web pages are all read by large language models, the whole ad-based business model of the web starts to fall apart. That's a 1 trillion domino line wobbling. Meta and Google, the twin gods of targeted advertising, are still printing money for now. Google just posted $100 billion in quarterly revenue. Meta cleared $51 billion, even as both burn billions training the AIs that could end their golden goose.
Yeah, and this is coming literally from the man that helped invent the internet, and I think he has foresight here on what could happen. I was actually, when I seen this X post, it really got me thinking, and I said, well, yeah, they're completely going around a lot of these ads, which I think are a good thing. I like it, but it's going to hurt the internet economy. That being said, certain places online are going to have immense benefit from this. Things like live sports, the UFC, football, things like YouTube, where they can place the ad inside and they can have the ad reads come directly from the content creator. There's no way to really get around those ads. So you're going to see ads in those sectors probably go up. What you were saying something pretty interesting about this earlier as well.
Yeah, so today on WDW Pro, I did say that they were talking about Disney and YouTube TV going at it and fighting each other. And if the ad and the revenue starts going more towards video and towards content creation, like Instagram, etc., rather than having to rely on ads appearing on websites or on search, then that would give YouTube an even bigger advantage also for its creators. But who knows if they'll actually take advantage of that situation.
Well, they could also place ads within the AI systems where advertisements would come back with your responses. I could see that happening, although that hasn't happened yet. I think they want to have a market consolidation first, where the new AI search engines kind of establish themselves before they start throwing in a bunch of ads. But that would also consolidate like ad advertisements with a few big players, and the same people that are running the AI search platforms are the same people that are kind of running YouTube. Let's actually go into this next story, and you just brought it up for me, and this has to do with the New York election. By this point, we already know who kind of won. It's Mamdani. The problem with this is the ballot that they did have was this looked like a calendar more than a ballot to me, and I actually zoomed in on this thing a bit, and I was trying to find Cuomo's name because he was the main candidate running against Mamdani. It was extremely hard for me to find it. Mamdani had his name on here multiple times on the top row with multiple different parties. They said if you want to vote for Mamdani, just X one of the boxes. I'm sure a lot of people X too, and when it goes into a digitalized vote counter system, is going to count too by accident. We're seeing a lot of shady things go on in this New York election, and a lot of the elections that just went down in the last few days, especially the California election. I think that election was the most shady of all. I think a lot of money was invested in that election. I think the California governor not only rigged the election, but it's looking like he possibly siphoned money off of that election so he would have money for his presidential campaign in 2028. The governor of California is Gavin Newsom, and we had covered that story a ton. And basically the envelope that the California Prop 50 ballot came in, you could see right through the envelope because there was a hole strategically placed there to see if somebody voted no. So it would be easy to discard a lot of the mail-in ballots. Also, the mail-in ballots for the California election, it was based upon an honor system. You were allowed to vote online, and they refused to look at ID even when people had it because that's the law in California. This allows for illegal migrants to vote in the state of California, just like they allow illegal migrants to vote in a lot of blue states right now.
And for people to even try to vote multiple times.
Yeah, go right back to that ballot just for a quick second. And I know you can't see it here. We covered this story on our night show, Nat and the Guy Live, where Nat's actually on camera. And it showed more of a close-up image of this. But believe me when I say this thing was the most confusing ballot I had ever seen. The only ballot I would say that was a little bit more confusing was the recent Canadian election, where they flooded the ballot with over 200 electoral names and buried Pierre Poilievre's name in there, hoping they could kind of rig that election as well. The candidate they always want to win is always front and center, the first name on every ballot, and it's the same with this Mamdani ballot here. One more thing about Mamdani. We showed the clip the other day, but the day after he wins an election, he has a slick as hell ad campaign, and at the end of that ad, he says, I know I told you to stop sending me money a few days ago, but you can start sending it again. We're going to need money to implement communism. Now, he didn't say communism, but that's kind of what he's implying, and I won't be surprised if a lot of big NGOs that still somehow are siphoning money away from the government start flooding money into New York to show how successful communism can be. Because if New York State kind of falls apart right now, the Democratic hopes are going to go away well before the midterms and well before 2028. They're going to want to float Mamdani and the New York economy so they can point to it, and all the other Democrats will get a down ballot boost from him.
However, there are some people trying to escape from the hellhole that is now Mamdani's New York. From Chicago One Ray, he says, escape from New York, real estate agents flooded with calls whose job will be moving people from New York to Florida. They're calling it the Mamdani migration. Businesses are holding off on investments and walking away from deals. The ultimate FAFO is about to take place.
Yeah, and maybe we'll play this clip and then we'll stop for a minute because me and you actually fled Canada a couple of years. How long was it ago now?
A year and a half ago.
Almost 2 years ago now. I know a lot about this, and it's not always about who's in power. It's kind of about, do you believe in the Canadian people to actually make a change at the ballot box? And there came a point where I no longer trusted the Canadian people. They want socialism. I think they're going to vote for socialism, and eventually they're going to get it. I think the same thing is happening in New York. I think the Mamdani election may be the final straw. Some people may hang around for a little while longer just to see if Mamdani actually does collapse the economy and what happens in the next election. Well, let's play the clip.
Some New Yorkers are thinking of packing up and getting out already. They call it the Mamdani migration. The New York Post is reporting that real estate agents are getting flooded with phone calls. Luxury real estate agent Ryan Serhant told the Post that his #1 job will be moving people from New York to Florida again. And based on the results, clients are going to hold off on making any kind of investment in New York City. Lydia Moynihan knows all about this. She's a financial correspondent at the Post and broke this story. Lydia,
And we'll continue with the clip in just a second, but Ron DeSantis has been hyper aware of this, really trying to get any disenfranchised firefighters or police officers from New York State to come down to Florida by offering bonuses. He understands New York's loss is Florida's gain. Florida really has the most to gain off of this because Ron DeSantis seems to be the only governor kind of courting these disenfranchised New York voters and citizens. These are the citizens that have money and that are able to actually leave the state and possibly start businesses, buy real estate in Florida.
And guy means Ron DeSantis.
I had a bunch of my friends over the weekend when they saw this coming saying, oh my goodness, I wish I sold last year. This is a nightmare. How could this be happening? So is this Mamdani migration a real thing?
I think it is, and I hate to say that. Look, what's not surprising is that in the wake of him clinching that Democratic nomination, that wealthy people, really anyone with sort of a vested interest in the city, was exploring options of where they could move. Florida, of course, is a well-trodden path at this point. But what's much more concerning is the fact that people are actually walking away from deals. So people who were either in process of signing and purchasing an apartment or, potentially buying something in the future, they're walking away. And so for the next 4 months, I think we're going to see a decrease in the investment in New York City. Anyone with a business is going to be a little hesitant. And of course, that's going to be amplified for 4 years if Mamdani is elected. And of course, Laura, the irony is that these are the very people who he needs to be paying for all of these programs. I mean, the things he's outlined sound like Doge cuts, right? Millions of dollars to transgender surgeries for minors, and there's really no way that he can do that.
Okay, that's good.
As I think people will.
And as we know, he did get elected, and there have been a lot more updates on this where luxury real estate realtors in Florida are actually saying that the phones are going off the hook right now. They don't need a large portion of people to leave New York for Florida. It's actually a very small portion. If they get 1% of the people to leave New York go to Florida, this is the 1% that open businesses, that are providing jobs, that are buying real estate. And the real estate people that are saying they're getting phone calls in Florida, it's the luxury market. So these are the people that would be opening businesses. It would be a huge, devastating loss for New York if those people left. Okay, let's go into California Prop 50. And I was talking a little bit about this already, but the video on the ground and the people on the ground are reporting all kinds of fraud in this election. And I think Donald Trump needs to be looking at this election, planning forward all the different types of corruption that were in this election, whether it was through digitalized ballots, mail-in ballots especially. We covered that. There was literally a hole in the envelope. So if you clicked no, they would know you voted no and could easily toss it out. Let's just play this lady's experience, or so-called experience, on what happened here.
From Wall Street Apes.
So I have a crazy story about voting in California. I voted by mail, so no biggie, but my mom went and voted in person. And the guy pulls up the, screen for her or whatever of what you're supposed to vote. And it's only coming up, yes. And my mom's like, this is not giving me a voting option. And he's like, yeah, you just press that button. And she's like, no. That's not what I want to vote. Like, it's not giving me another option. It's only saying yes. And he was like, well, that's just hit that button and that's your vote. She's like, no. They had to call somebody else over, and she was like, excuse me, I'm not getting an option on what to vote for. So the lady had to back out and re-go in and set her up where it'll say yes or no. But the guy was only setting her up for yes. Tell me how that's not fully rigged. Gavin Newsom be up to some shady stuff, because
okay, that's good.
The guy.
And I will say this is just hearsay, but all the other things we covered about this on our other show together, me and Nat, they had the mail-in ballots with the hole in the envelope. They have no voter ID. There's thousands of videos literally coming in from California right now about people that brought their cell phones and secretly recorded them trying to give their IDs to the people running the ballot boxes, and them being absolutely refused. We also seen other videos coming out of New York where they're collecting illegal migrants and bringing them to voting stations where they're not actually legally allowed to vote. This is going on in California, New York, and a lot of these Democrat states. The Trump administration really needs to be paying attention exactly how they're cheating, and if they're able to get rid of the filibuster, which there's big talk of Trump getting rid of the filibuster, he needs to focus on these elections. Now, as much as election integrity is important, what I don't want to see happen is them press a digital ID onto the people through voter integrity. There's ways to do it without doing that. A physical manual ID not being a digital ID, you're completely capable of doing it that way. It does not need to be a digital ID. So if he tries to bring a digital ID in for voter integrity, press back. The reason people absolutely love Trump is because his base is able to steer him in the right direction. He was big on the jibby jab for a long time. He kept touting that until he started getting booed at his rallies. And then he slowly started to quiet down about it. And then he appointed RFK, which was a big win for vaccine injured individuals. Okay, let's go into, we were just talking about the filibuster here. And a lot of people are against Trump getting rid of the filibuster. They should not be, because if he doesn't do it, the Democrats are guaranteed to do it. How do we know? Because it's coming from Obama's own mouth. Let's listen to Obama talk about this.
By guaranteeing that every American citizen has equal representation in our government, including the American citizens who live in Washington, D.C. and in Puerto Rico. They're Americans. By ending some of the partisan gerrymandering so that all voters have the power to choose their politicians, not the other way around. And if all this takes eliminating the filibuster, another Jim Crow relic, in order to secure the God-given rights of every American, then that's what we should do.
Okay, that's good.
By guaranteeing that every American...
And that's back from 2020. They've been trying to do this for quite a while. They just didn't have a big enough majority. Trump currently has it. And the big reason he's going to want to get rid of the filibuster is actually what's going on in the Supreme Court right now. What's going on in the Supreme Court, they might knock down the right for Trump to implement tariffs on other countries and force billions of dollars of refunds to these countries. Trump needs to make sure that doesn't happen. A lot of the questions these Supreme Court justices were asking in that case yesterday, the ruling's supposed to come back early next year, so Trump may have to give back those tariffs unless he gets rid of this filibuster. If he gets rid of this filibuster, a lot of the stuff Trump did through executive order, he's going to actually be able to get through the House and the Senate and actually enshrine it into law. He's going to need to do this before the Democrats do it. Like they said, they're going to make Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. a state. They're saying they want to get rid of gerrymandering. We just seen what happened in California. Gavin Newsom literally gerrymandered the entire map. Okay, let's go into this. Was really good news that came out here, and this is Nancy Pelosi. We're going to talk about this and why this is such good news. I don't think she's really consolidated the power of her wing in the Democratic Party, so I think the Democratic Party right now is going to be in absolute chaos.
From CNN Politics, Nancy Pelosi announces she will not seek re-election to Congress after nearly 40 years in Washington. Nancy Pelosi, the first and only female speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives and one of the most powerful figures in the Democratic politics for decades, has announced she will not seek re-election. I have truly loved serving you as your voice in Congress, and I have always honored the Song of St. Francis. Lord, make an instrument of thy peace, blah, 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 blah. And she said, I will not be seeking re-election to Congress. She's 85, said on Thursday in a sweeping video that stood as a love letter to the city she has represented for nearly 40 years.
That's pretty good. What we're seeing happen in the Democratic Party right now, Mondani just came to power. There is big NGO money behind Mondani from Soros, from 6 different Soros companies that funneled $40 million into his campaign illegally. AOC is one of the other big superstars. The radical wing of the Democratic Party does not appeal to the moderates, but it does appeal to the radicals. And it seems like that wing of the party is the one kind of taking over. And the only thing to kind of counterbalance that wing of the Democratic Party was Nancy Pelosi. And as much as I hate her, she's far more moderate than the new wing of the Democratic Party. She was supposed to pass her power over to Gavin Newsom. That's her golden boy, her golden child. He's going to run in 2028. If he would have won the presidency, then she would have officially consolidated the power of the Democratic Party that she holds around him. And that just hasn't really happened. I don't think Gavin Newsom's going to win in 2028. If he doesn't, her power base is going to start to dwindle and dwindle because she hasn't appropriately transferred power over to the correct politicians yet. Okay, let's go read the headline here for me real quick.
From Wall Street Apes, the left is the same everywhere, so pay attention to this. Quote, here's something that will send a chill down your spine. The left-wing political party in Australia introduced a bill to steal residents' private land without compensation. Every member of the left voted in favor of it.
Okay, yeah, I remember this story now, and I've been covering in depth what's going on in Canada. They are literally enshrining into law the right to take private citizens' private property rights away, and they're giving it to Aboriginal tribes. They're working in conjunction with the UN. They're using UN law, which Canada is not required to follow, but they are following it, and they're setting these massive precedents. There's currently a new case that just came up in Kamloops. We covered it earlier in the show today, where a band is actually claiming the entire city is their Aboriginal land and they want it given back to them. This is also happening in Australia. Canada and Australia seem to be where the UN is really trying to set these precedents into law, and then they're going to spread them out from there. We know the WEF slogan was "You will own nothing and you will be happy." People laugh and chuckled at it, but they actually had a real plan all along.
And here at the end it says, luckily the bill was struck down, but every member of the left party voted in favor to steal private land without compensation.
Yeah, so even though this got struck down, the fact that they're attempting this, and they are not only attempting it in Canada, they're actually winning these legal precedents in Canada, and then they're continuing on with more precedents. They're going to continue to put these cases into law, whether it's Australia or Canada. America really needs to stand up to these globalists and make sure people know that private property rights are really the foundation of the family, of the society, of capitalism. We need private property rights. Otherwise, we're just going to go back to a feudalist state.
So here's something that will send a chill down your spine. Earlier this year, the Greens introduced a bill in the upper house called the Use of Vacant Land Bill. And under it, if you own any vacant land, it can be taken by the state government or local council without being paid 1 cent and without your permission. And the problem with that bill was every single member of the Labor Party in the upper house supported it. It got through the upper house despite the fact that the Liberals opposed it, but it did get rejected in the lower house. But I just want to point this out to you, that 9 members of the Labor Party of South Australia supported a bill that was a direct attack on your private property rights. And to me, that says it all. So here's something that will send a chill down your...
And what we have to realize is a lot of people... I live here in Mexico now. I left Canada because of the crazy liberal government in Canada. Canada is headed quickly towards socialism. That country has already enshrined into law that private property can be taken away from Canadian citizens and given back to Aboriginal tribes. Now, they're not saying that in Australia. What they're saying is any vacant land the government has the right to take. So it's not always going to be on the back of Aboriginal rights. It can be any number of ways these governments want to take private property away from the citizens and either give it back to themselves, give it back to Aboriginal tribes, or create a global government and give it to the UN. As we're talking about the UN, the next article has to do with the UN here.
From Visigar 24, UN Chief Antonio Guterres says wealthy nations must cut emissions and deliver quote-unquote climate justice by spending $1.3 trillion per year on financing the energy transition in developing countries. The speech comes ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference COP30.
Okay, 1.3 trillion is going to bankrupt countries, and that's the plan, that they want to get these countries so much in debt, so bankrupt that they're going to have to sign over their sovereignty to a global government, possibly. This is absolutely crazy. This is antithetically the opposite speech that Donald Trump gave. Donald Trump gave a speech in front of the UN, which really dropped a lot of globalist jaws. But let's listen to this gentleman here.
Governments must arrive at the upcoming COP30 meeting in Brazil with concrete plans to slash their own emissions over the next decade, while also delivering climate justice to those on the front lines of a crisis they did little to cause. Just look at Jamaica. The clean energy revolution means it is possible to cut emissions while growing economies. But developing countries still lack the finance and technologies needed to support their transitions. In Brazil, countries must agree on a credible plan to mobilize $1.6 trillion annually in climate finance by 2035 for developing countries. And developed countries must honor their commitments to double finance for adaptation to at least $40 billion this year. And the Loss and Damage Fund needs to be capitalized with significant contributions.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if that was a little bit hard to hear, but the fact that he's demanding $1.3 trillion from governments around the world, the UN is quickly become financially bankrupt because the UN is no longer funding them. A lot of countries are turning their backs on the funding to them. They have a plan to start taxing global citizens. The way they want to do that, they want individual governments to tax individual citizens and then give that money to the UN. It looks like they also want to tax individual governments for climate and other purposes. They're trying to fill their coffers so they can refinance this idea of a global governance. Donald Trump has thrown a monkey wrench into their plans, standing up to them at the UN, giving that global climate agenda speech, as well as a lot of other things Donald Trump is doing behind the scenes with digital currency and things of that nature.
And also because the UN is running out of money, so they need to find ways to actually get more if they want to continue.
Yeah.
So they come up with any excuse.
Well, and it's not just the UN. It's a lot of these globalist organizations like the WHO. The WHO is absolutely strapped for cash. USAID was their financing. Tedros was coming out just the other day talking about they need donations. They need people to donate money. Otherwise, the WHO may cease to exist. I'm more than happy to see the WHO cease to exist. I would love to see the EU cease to exist. Why? Because they're taking the sovereignty of individual countries and making them vote in alignment. A lot of these countries and their citizens do not believe in the ideals that the UN is trying to profess.
The WHO is the World Health Organization.
Okay, let's go into this. And I just found these statistics absolutely fascinating.
From Avery Day, I actually like her. If you don't follow her, go follow her. Denmark tracked 321 Palestinian men granted asylum in 1992. 63% were convicted of a crime, 22% received a prison sentence, 55% were on welfare by 2019. They had around 999 children, 34% were convicted, 13% got prison sentences, 37% received benefits in 2019. The total cost to taxpayers from 1992 to 2025 it was around 246 to 319 million, or around 800,000 per man.
Yeah, and this study was started in 1992, so it's a full-fledged study, so we can actually see what this immigration is doing to these countries. And yes, it's doing what they want. These immigrants are having plenty of kids, as it kind of states there in the statistics. The problem is in the need to kind of lift up their failing birth rates, there's all kinds of crime and all kinds of negative things brought into the society. And this study really needs to get much broader recognition from the general public in countries that are trying to fight immigration, like the United States. I mean, countries like Canada, the people are completely against immigration right now. They used to have the best immigration system, and now they have the absolute worst. They're flooding in over 1 million illegal immigrants a year. Mark Carney's kind of touting that he's slashing immigration by 50%. There needs to be a complete stop to it, and they need to go back to their old system where they filled the holes in their society from immigrants that wanted to integrate into that society.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, that in Canada, it's not even illegal. Mostly it's legally done. It's legal migrants that get to Canada.
Well, and that's the problem right now. These governments are realizing the citizens are against illegal immigration, so they're doing everything they can to turn illegal immigration to legal immigration. What do I kind of mean by this? You can take the UK as the perfect example. They're saying any illegal migrant that comes over on a boat, they're going to send back to France because that's where the majority are coming from, and in return they'll take 2 legal immigrants through their borders. So they're going to give back illegal immigrants so they can take legal immigrants. So it's much harder to kick a legal immigrant out of your country. Also, a legal immigrant is entitled to a far-reaching number of benefits, which absolutely puts a financial hurt on that country, whether it's the UK, whether it's Canada. Eastern Europe is starting to wake up to this, and you're seeing a lot of Donald Trump signs around the world because he's not afraid to speak up against climate change, not afraid to speak up against illegal immigration. He's the first real leader to kind of say no more illegal immigration. We're going to put a stop to it, and he's actually doing it. Every other leader in the EU know their citizens don't want it. They'll give lip service to it, but they'll actually increase the numbers of legal and illegal immigrants coming into the country. Okay, we can play this real quick.
Starting in 1992, the Danish government followed 321 Palestinian men that they let into their country over 30 years. Of those 320 men, 204 of them were convicted of a crime. That is 64%. 176 of those 321 men were on welfare. That is 55%. They followed the second generation, and of those 321 men, they had about 999 total children. Of those children, 337 of them were convicted of a crime. It's 34%. 132 served a prison sentence, and 372 of the second generation children, that's 37%, were on welfare. It is estimated that these 321 Palestinian men cost the taxpayers between $250 and $320 million. Per person, that is between $770,000 and $985,000 per man.
Okay. And we can kind of go into, we have one Mexican story I put here, but there's actually a few that I want to talk about. Let's start with this. And this is a big headline because of what's going on in Venezuela. Donald Trump is ratcheting up the tension on Maduro in Venezuela. We reported a few days ago, we were expecting strikes within Venezuela from the U.S. military in possible hours. It's been days now. It may be weeks, but it's going to be very hard for Donald Trump to pull those troops back. I expect something to happen with Maduro in Venezuela. At the end of the first Trump administration, he had actually negotiated for Maduro to step down with his family and his generals to get complete immunity if they would step down. Trump's term ended and he was unable to kind of conclude that deal, but they were this close from finalizing that deal. I think Trump's thinking if he ratchets up the pressure now, he can get that same deal, but he can close it this time. I don't know if that's the case. There's a lot of people probably telling Maduro, you can't step down. We will end you if you do. What are these organizations? These would be cartels within Mexico. This would be the Chinese government. This would be the Russian government. They don't want Maduro to step down because if he does, the next on the target list is going to be cartels in Mexico. Okay, let's read this real quick.
From Eric Doherty, holy smokes, President Trump is now plotting to deploy American troops into Mexico to take out bad cartels. It would include American troops and intel officers on the ground, striking substance labs and cartel leaders south of the border.
Yeah, and I've kind of talked about this. Canada is running headlong into socialism. They just released their budget and the government is supposed to finance everything. Private industries leaving the country and the Canadian government is trying to finance everything. That's a sure bet. And a sure path into socialism. Donald Trump's doing the exact opposite. He's getting massive private investment to come into the United States. He's then coming in behind that with massive public investment. They're heading headlong into capitalism. The thing is, then we have Mexico down here, and they're being pulled every single way. I mean, Sheinbaum is in a tough spot. She has the U.S. wanting them to go one way. She has China wanting them to go the other way. She has these global organizations like the WHO, the UN wanting her to go even another way with digital ID and digital currency. A lot of the time she plays lip service or puts something into effect like a digital ID. The digital ID here in Mexico is an absolute joke. What you do is you just print it off your computer, you laminate it yourself, and they consider that your digital ID. So she can say to global organizations, yes, I'm implementing it, but in reality, it's not effective on the ground. And it's going to be interesting what happens with the tariff deal with Mexico. I think a lot of that's going to depend on her ability and willingness to work with the U.S. and the U.S. military to fight the cartels. Okay, let's play the clip just a little bit.
Would include American troops and intelligence officers on the ground striking drug labs and cartel leaders south of the border. This would essentially open a new front in the president's military campaign against cartels, which is thus far focused on strikes against alleged drug-carrying boats. Well, on Saturday, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth announced what appears to be the 15th boat strike in the Caribbean. Following all of this, Courtney Q would include American troops and intelligence.
And these boat strikes that Trump's doing on Venezuela is setting a precedent. So if Maduro does step down when he does come after cartels in Mexico, he already has the precedent set where this kind of behavior is okay. The thing about this, Claudia Sheinbaum, she's going to be in the next clip here, and she's actually defending the rights of the cartel members and the drug dealers. Now, is this just lip service? Because we know behind the scenes she's been working with Donald Trump. Is she only willing to work with Trump until she gets a tariff deal? I think it's going to be written into that tariff deal that ongoing cooperation with the U.S. military is probably required. Why don't you read the headline? We'll play it. She is speaking Spanish. I'll have you translate a little bit in Spanish if you can.
Yes. So it says the war on narcos is illegal because it violates the rights of drug traffickers. And she has these daily morning conferences. So she said this recently. And she said,
regresar a la guerra contra el narco no es opción.
Going back to the war on drugs is not an option.
No es opción.
It's not an option.
Primero, porque está fuera del marco de la ley.
First, because it goes outside of the legal framework.
Todos estos de la derecha que se llenan la boca de las palabras Estado de Derecho.
All of these people on the right and conservatives that fill their mouths with the words, the state of law.
And stop right there. And she was blaming a lot of this on the right in Mexico. The problem is there is no real right in Mexico. A lot of people don't know. Even the right-wing parties in Mexico are extremely liberal.
Y defienden la guerra contra el narco. La guerra contra el narco está fuera de la ley.
And the people on the right that defend the war on drugs, it goes outside of the law.
Porque como lo dije o lo he dicho en varias ocasiones, es permiso para matar.
Because as I have said before, in various occasions, it is a license to kill.
Sin ningún juicio.
Without any judgment.
Y eso en México nadie o muy poquitos están de acuerdo.
And that in Mexico, nobody is okay with that.
Está fuera del marco de la ley. Y segundo, no sirvió de nada más que para aumentar los homicidios en México.
It goes outside of the legal framework, and secondly, it also did nothing but increase the homicide rate in Mexico.
El nivel de violencia.
And the level of violence.
Entonces, estos llamados autoritarios, porque son autoritarios, es ir hacia el fascismo, regresar a la...
So all of these authoritarian calls to do so, to go against the war, to do the war on drugs, are authoritarian, and it's essentially fascism.
Yeah, what we have to realize, this isn't like America. These organized cartels and drug gangs are entrenched in the legitimate economy, the illegitimate economy. They're extremely well organized, extremely violent. Countries that have dealt with similar situations like El Salvador or Argentina is currently attempting to do are having to be extremely heavy-handed and look past basic human rights and some laws in order to address the problem for the entire society. That being said, it's going to be very interesting the tightrope Claudia Sheinbaum tries to walk here. I do appreciate what she is doing for the country when it comes to the tariff deal, because she seems to be cooperating to the best of her ability. Unlike Canada, the problem is she's between a rock and a hard place, and I don't know what she's going to do when it comes down to Trump and the cartels. We're going to have to wait and see. But there was also another incident in Mexico just a few days ago. Why don't you talk about that?
The mayor of a city in Michoacan called Uruapan was murdered in front of his family and his followers, and that has triggered a bunch of protests and calls to actually do something about security. People in Michoacan have taken over the local palaces and government offices, and it seems like it has been ramping up, and the calls to go march in every single city in Mexico continue to rise. However, it is interesting to see where the financing for these protests is coming from, who's organizing them, and the fact that Claudia Sheinbaum and her government and her party Morena are going completely against it, because it seems like they're scared and they're trying to give other things to talk about other than the things that are happening on the street.
Well, and it's expected to be a huge protest over this upcoming weekend on Saturday here in Mexico City and really all around Mexico. It's going to be interesting how big these protests get and what kind of call to action that these people want. We recently seen in, what was the one country they had the color revolution in? Nepal. We've seen what happened in Nepal when the young people came out to protest. Now, I don't think that's going to happen here, and I think the government's kind of prepared for it. But this is a young people's protest that are kind of demanding action.
And it's not next weekend, it's the weekend after, so November the 15th.
November the 15th. And we are definitely going to be reporting on that, whether we're on the ground or we're just taking clips from what other people filmed. It's going to be an interesting time in Mexican politics when that protest happens.
However, it could also just be one of many protests that have been done against the insecurity in the country, and yet nothing gets done.
Yeah, but I will say this. When is the next election here? Not till 2028, I believe?
5 years from now.
Yeah, so it's 5 more years to the next.
Almost 4 years.
4 or 5 years to the next election. So it's quite a long way away. But I think what's going to go on with the cartels, and especially with Trump, the Mexican government, and the cartels, will decide that election. Because even if he starts having ops now and he starts really trying to turn one cartel against another or take direct action against them, it's going to take years to clean that up or have appropriate action done. I think it's going to peak right around the time of the next election. Somebody that's well placed to kind of exploit that is Lily Tejas. She's a politician here in Mexico City. She's been the one politician in Mexico that has really had the balls to stand up and say something. Now, she said something on the American news, international news, and Mexican news, and hasn't suffered any repercussions. Any other politician would have. So it's going to be interesting what she has to say come the Saturday after next. Okay, let's go into this next clip with Tucker. And we've been kind of covering this Tucker situation quite a bit.
There's another war that has been brewing within the conservatives in America. This is also from Mario Nafwa saying, Tucker, what's conservative about Lindsey Graham or Ted Cruz? Do you want me to play it? Or
yeah, you can play it.
Okay.
The idea that Lindsey Graham is a conservative, with the caveat that, like, who even knows what a conservative is now? Conservative is Mark Levin a conservative? Dave Rubin, whoever that is he conservative? Okay, I guess. I mean, whatever. But if those are the people, Ted Cruz, conservative? I don't take a close look at Ted Cruz's life. What's conservative about it? Let's take a close look at Lindsey Graham's life. Is that conservative? And what's the reference point for that?
That's fine.
What do you even mean? People like that have a completely different set of values on the deepest level, not on a surface level. We're not arguing here about tax rates, and whether we should allow reimportation of prescription drugs. I mean, this is not a policy debate. This is a debate that flows from deepest level convictions, from foundational beliefs, and that is evident in the way that people live. If I took a microscope to your life, what would I find? And in the case of almost every single warmonger, you find chaos and sadness and alienation and weird behavior and abusiveness and alcoholism. It's like they're a disaster. And so they're projecting outward the hate that they feel on, in some cases, entire
Okay, and
populations.
that's pretty good. And that is what the new right is really anti-war. It's anti what a lot of the neocons or the former rhinos, Republicans in name only, used to be. And I think the rhinos can really feel things slipping out of their hands with this new MAGA movement, which has been going on for almost a decade now. But they know Trump's out of office after these next 3 years. And I think they want to put the guardrails back on. People like Ben Shapiro, like Mark Levin, like Ted Cruz, like the big money donors. They want the conservative party of old, but that's not what conservative means anymore. It's a big tent organization. Libertarians have a big part within the movement. The anti-war movement within the party is huge. Smaller government is what we want. And this attack on Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson is very interesting because you're seeing the rise of really Christian nationalism and a new set of moral beliefs in America. And that seems to be the through thread of like a lot of what the new conservative movement is. A lot of libertarians that used to not identify as conservatives are really coming over because they see a lack of moral foundation within the libertarian movement. So now they call themselves libertarian conservatives. People like Dave Smith, who I really like. I know you don't, but he is not only a great debater, he is one of the big thought leaders, not only on YouTube, but on X and in this modern era of America. They really need to back off Tucker Carlson because it does not look good trying to censor speech. As much as it's an anti-war movement, it is a free speech movement first. With what just happened with wokeism, trying to censor everybody, calling everybody a mustache man and everything else, we're not having it anymore. And we're going to start speaking up and saying, we don't want guardrails. We want the best ideas to rise to the top. And the best way you do that is through free speech and through debate. If Ben Shapiro wants to cancel Nick Fuentes, and we know he does because he tried to do it when he had less than 1,000 followers, he should just debate him. And if he has the best ideas, he will win. And I have to say, I agree with Nick Fuentes on a lot of things, but recently I watched the podcast called Basecamp, and they brought a lot of good talking points out, which is really making me question the fundamental beliefs of Nick Fuentes and the Catholic nationalist movement. It's no different than what the big money Jewish movement is kind of doing and trying to garner influence within MAGA and the new conservative movement.
And how the Catholic nationalist movement that Fuentes is trying to lead and to head is essentially incompatible with the values that were set forth by the founding fathers and how America was built as a nation. Now, is that good or is that bad? Depends on how you want to look at it. But if you want to be a conservative in the new sense of the word and the current sense of the word, you cannot censor and you cannot take away free speech, because that is a core tenet that many, not just in the States, in America, but all around the world look up to and actually encourage. And that is a big part of the support that the movement has worldwide even.
Well, and we also have to say, Nick Fuentes is big on Catholic nationalism, but if you look at the most elite in the Catholic Church, which would be the Pope and the hierarchy, and what they're kind of putting out there, it's a globalist movement. It's a huge leftist movement. They're trying to create a one world religion by inviting Muslims and Jews into the church and everything else. So I don't know if that's antithetical to Nick Fuentes, but I'm definitely against what the Pope is doing. I don't think he's a good representation of Catholicism. That being said, I do understand there is a bit of a schism going on in modern Catholicism, especially a lot of American Catholics look past the Pope and do not listen to what he has to say. But if you're doing that, are you really a Catholic at that point? Or are you just a Protestant? Okay, those are some big questions, maybe best left for another day. Let's go into the next article here.
From also Mario Nawfal, NATO's Mark Rutte, we cannot be naive about Russia, China, and Iran.
Okay, and they're starting to realize they have lost this war against Russia. They're trying to at least put it on pause so they can pick it up later on. Let's see what he had to say, and then I'll kind of get into the nuts and bolts here.
With North Korea, with Iran and others. They are increasing their defense and industrial collaboration to unprecedented levels. They are preparing for long-term confrontation. We cannot be naive. We must be prepared. President Roosevelt famously said that powerful enemies must be outfought and outproduced. And that was in 1942. And the same can be said today. And Russia is not alone in its effort.
Okay, and that's good. And he wants to prepare the EU for a long-term confrontation. So even if this Ukraine thing kind of simmers down, they want to be able to pick it up at a later date, whether it's through Ukraine or another bordering state with Russia. I don't think Russia wants a long-term war, and I don't think they want all of Ukraine. They want an off-ramp at this point. They want Eastern Ukraine because that's where the primary Russian speakers were. We'll see what happens, but it does not seem to be going in the right direction. I know Trump is trying to get a deal, but he's not willing to make the proper concessions, especially when Russia's winning the war in the way they are right now. I mean, I followed that war 3 hours a day since the beginning of the war, and the war mapping is not headed in the right direction. Major concessions are going to have to be made if they want to pause this conflict.
And before you go into the next topic, Adam says Nick is still a child and too quick to react.
Yeah,
and I agree with that.
Well, I will say this. He was banished early on in his career when he was a college student, and he was kind of forced to say the most radical and the most outlandish things to even get recognized, to get people to follow him over to wherever he was. I mean, he wasn't allowed anywhere. He wasn't allowed on planes, trains, or automobiles, and he was banned off of YouTube. That being said, that ban is kind of lifting, and even if we don't agree with Nick Fuentes, it is very important that free speech has a right to debate what they want in the public forum there. And I think Nick Fuentes does really press the boundaries, and it really shows what's acceptable speech, what's not acceptable speech. And furthermore, oh God, I lost my train of thought there.
But also with Nick, if you're having to say all the outlandish things, are your points actually good, or are you just a provocateur that people find funny to watch?
Well, he has moderated his views a lot, and I think he's going to try to transition into politics. He's kind of talked about that. He has a lot of political backing. We'll kind of see what happens. I think he's going to kind of represent Christian nationalism. It's a bit more of a fringe movement in the United States, but it is a rising movement. So, yeah.
Adam also says, our divide is not left versus right. It is the idolized actors and the powerful we elect versus the serfs. They create fault divides or fault lines, I guess, and lie to everyone, but only some are manipulated. And then he said false to what you said about Nick.
Yeah, I do agree with some of that, but I also think the divide's less left versus right, although I do see there is a left versus right divide. I think it's between freedom and authoritarianism. I think the left is very authoritarian, but you do see a lot of people on the right, like a Ben Shapiro, like people that are trying to implement censorship right now, that are very authoritarian. And then you have people that are more freedom-based. A lot of libertarians are freedom-based, and that's why they came over to the conservative movement.
Which was bigger and gaining more ground than they ever will.
Yeah.
But continuing down that path, from Florida politics, Randy Fine calls Tucker Carlson the most dangerous anti-Semite in America. He has chosen to take the mantle of leader of a modern-day man with a mustache youth. Florida Republican Representative Randy Fine takes issue with Tucker Carlson's recent ideological evolution, saying he's inspired a movement of hate in our midst. Fine is singling out Carlson as a leading dark force rising on our side, calling him the most dangerous anti-Semite in America during a speech to the Republican Jewish Coalition.
And this is absolutely ridiculous. It's one thing if you want to target Nick Fuentes and call him all these names. I think a lot of people would agree with that. It's another thing trying to go after Tucker Carlson, and I think they're going to hurt their movement overall. They're really trying to put the guardrails on censorship. I don't think it's going to work. I think when you go after Tucker Carlson, you're going to hurt your movement more than you're going to hurt Tucker Carlson's movement. Also, that being said, they were calling everybody Nazis for the longest time, and they took away the meaning of that word where it no longer has impact. They're starting to do the same with anti-Semitism here.
Mm-hmm. And that's only going to hurt their movement as well.
Yeah.
And I do think it is creating false divides. But Adam says 100%, and he also says that he likes your views.
Oh, thank you. And I do like
Somebody does.
And I do like when people disagree with me, because he was disagreeing a bit, and I do appreciate that. I mean, me and Nat fight all the time. We used to
in a debating way, not in a fighting way.
Yeah, or in a debating way. But we used to do it on camera a lot more, because I found it a lot more interesting and fun. But the audience did not like it. So
no, nobody likes it when we debate each other.
Okay, let's go into David Sachs. And he's one of the big AI thought leaders and just business leaders. So let's see what he had to say here.
From A16Z, David Sachs says the biggest risk of AI was described not by James Cameron in The Terminator, but by George Orwell in 1984.
Okay, let's play the clip here.
I almost feel like the term woke AI is insufficient to explain what's going on because it somehow trivializes it. I mean, what we're really talking about is Orwellian AI. We're talking about AI that lies to you, that distorts an answer, that rewrites history in real time to serve a current political agenda of the people who are in power. I mean, it's very Orwellian, and we were definitely on that path.
Yeah, and what he said there about it's there to benefit the people that are in power. And we seen when AI first came out, it was extremely woke. Elon Musk was kind of able to counter that with Grok, and people were kind of seeing through it, and it was laying it on way too thick. They've kind of rolled it back a little bit to something that's a little bit more acceptable. But if you're on the right or you're a conservative, you definitely notice how woke AI has been over the last few years. I do like Grokopedia. I just found out about it the other day. We've done quite a few stories, but it is a great counterbalance to Wikipedia. Wikipedia has been corrupted for years. The gentleman that created Wikipedia actually came out years ago and was talking about how it had been corrupted by fact checkers, NGOs, and other big money organizations. Finally, there's something to kind of counterbalance that. Either Grokopedia will completely take over, or Wikipedia will have to change its ways and kind of clean up its act if it wants to survive here.
And Guy means Wikipedia or Wokepedia, either of those.
Path before President Trump's election. It was part of the Biden EO. We saw it happen, in the release of that first Gemini model. That was not an accident. Those distorted outputs came from somewhere. To me, this is the biggest risk of AI. Actually, it was not described by James Cameron. It was described by George Orwell. In my view, it's not The Terminator, it's 1984, that as AI eats the internet and becomes the main way that we interact and get our information online, that it'll be used by the people in power to control the information we receive, that it'll contain an ideological bias, that essentially it'll censor us. All that trust and safety apparatus that was created for social media will be ported over to this new world of AI. And then on top of that, you've got the surveillance issues where, AI is going to know everything about you. It's going to be your kind of personal assistant. And so it's kind of the perfect tool for the government to monitor and control you. And to me, that is by far the biggest risk of AI. And that's the thing we should be working towards preventing. And the problem is a lot of these regulations that are being whipped up by these fear-mongering techniques, they're actually empowering the government to engage in this type of control that I think we should all be very afraid of, actually.
Yeah, and before Trump, we had seen a real consolidation of the big systems, whether it was AI, big tech, Hollywood, you name it. The left kind of had control over it. Donald Trump is kind of destroying that, but as he's destroying it, now is the time where regular citizens can really have their input and kind of demand freedom and lay down a groundwork for long-lasting freedom. Because as Trump tears it down, you have to think it's only a matter of time before a new system's built in its place. And as much as I do like Trump, you do have to be wary of digital ID, digital currency, a lot of things he's putting the framework to bring in. So now's the time where the old system's kind of being torn down as the new system's being built. Hopefully the general public's going to have a say on how far is too far. And I think digital ID is the foundation everything is going to be built on. We need to fight digital ID with everything that we can, even if you're forced to accept it because it's connected with your bank account or other things that you're going to have access to. Using it as least as possible is going to be very important. Digital ID is another thing that is going to be layered on top of that. And then it's only a matter of time before you get a social credit score. He was comparing AI to Orwell rather than Terminator. I think it's really a two-stage solution. AI, is very Orwellian, and especially the way it's able to manipulate the human mind. But we can only look to China before it's a matter of time before AI and robotics could become the Terminator. I think stage 1, AI is Orwellian. Stage 2, maybe it becomes the Terminator.
And Adam also says one-word dismissals are not an intelligent way of finding the truth. Debate is needed. And he also says that when he said false, it was actually a correction and a typo, so he hasn't disagreed with you yet. And Walker, hello Walker. Walker
Oh,
says,
good to see you, Walker.
I said Wikipedia as the Spanish pronunciation, so Wikipedia, I guess. And Adam also says, King Charles called for a military-style campaign to enforce the Great Reset Davos 2020 WEF meeting.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and thank God for Trump, because without Trump, there would be no counterbalance. Oh God, there was something else I wanted to say there.
Well, we can go to Larry Fink.
Okay, let's go with Larry Fink. Maybe it will come back to me here.
From Real World Asset Watch list, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink says every currency, ETF, and asset will be digitized and tokenized with a global settlement layer connecting it all.
Okay, and don't play the clip yet. Yeah, and this is the real scary thing about digital currency. It's not even the first layer of what digital currency is, where they can see every single transaction. It's that second layer that people don't really understand what's coming in, and that third layer. The second layer is they want to have programmable digital currency, so they can reward you or stop you from buying certain things, or even force you to spend your money in a certain amount of time to force the economy or uplift the economy. But the other part is they want to tokenize everything. So for instance, the light in my studio, my camera, they want to tokenize my desk. So if I ever sell it, I'll have to pay taxes on it. They'll know exactly what I own, where I own it. Along with that tokenization, they're talking about tokenizing the environment, the rivers, the lakes, the trees. It's crazy the amount they want to go into this tokenization. The blockchain is not just for a currency. They want to use it for tokenization of everything and complete control. Okay, let's hear what he has to say here.
I would say the biggest question from central banks is, what is the role of tokenization and digitization? How quickly should they think about digitizing their own currency? What does that mean for the role of the dollar? If every currency digitizes and we have, what does that mean for bank payments? What does that mean for the payment companies like MasterCard and Visa? All these are being questioned right now. I think we spend so much time talking about AI. We're not spending enough time talking about how quickly we're going to tokenize every financial asset, and the opportunity we're going to have a digital wallet and moving, ETFs and other things through a digital wallet. And I think that's going to happen worldwide very rapidly. And I think most countries are ill-prepared for that and underappreciate how technology is changing that, not unlike how technology is changing AI and other things. It will be changing the technology around the plumbing of finance.
Yeah, and I am very much against digital ID and digital currency. I look a lot into it. They're currently implementing it in the EU. Trump's doing it through a stable coin, so he's doing it in a little bit of a different way. The question is he going to try to erase the debt with that, number one? But number two, what Trump is proposing is actually throwing a monkey wrench into what the EU wanted to do. All digital currency was supposed to appear on the surface that each country would have its own digital currency, but it would all flow through the financial system of the EU. Trump's throwing a monkey wrench in that, and he's not making a CBDC. He's making a stable coin, which possibly would allow regular currency to stay with the digital currency, and that would offer far more freedom, and it wouldn't feel like so much government control. But it also takes away the EU's ability to centralize all other digital currencies around its framing and its model. Trump's actually trying to frame freedom into a digital currency through stablecoins. At least that's what he's saying. If he leaves the regular currency alone, still allows gold or silver along with the digital currency, I think people will have a lot less of a problem with it, and people are more likely to adopt it. It's also very interesting what China's currently doing. They're ready to release a BRICS digital currency probably here in the next year or two. But on top of that, they're making huge vaults in all the BRICS countries where they're holding massive amounts of gold. And what they're doing, for instance, if they make $1 billion trade with Brazil, what they're saying is, we'll give you $1 billion in yen. You can buy any products you want from us. And let's say you have $200 or $300 million left over. You can go to the bank vault, which they'll have one in Brazil. You can exchange the yen for gold. And this is why gold continues to increase. It's had a little bit of a dip lately, but overall, the Chinese are really trying to take over the digital currency market and the basic asset market by securing everything with gold. Gold's going to be really hard for the United States to compete with. They may be forced to underline or underwrite all their currencies with gold as well. Otherwise, the Chinese yen will be more trusted eventually. They haven't rolled out the entire system, so I understand the yen doesn't have that trust factor yet. But if you can go to any bank and exchange the yen for gold, people are going to trust it a lot more.
And Adam says, the censorship laws they pass will be weaponized so that what we are talking about now will be illegal because it doesn't fit the narrative. And that's already started to happen in Canada and in the UK. They're already arresting people for things that are uncomfortable. It's
already happening. And I don't know if Adam's from the United States or not, but if you're from the United States, you're lucky because Trump is protecting free speech and you have far more rights because it's enshrined in the Constitution. We're originally from Canada, and Canada is becoming completely authoritarian. The type of speech laws they're putting in, they're doing it through hate speech and forced speech laws like pronouns, things of this nature. It's completely crazy, and the kind of sentencing they're starting to hand out is insane as well. The UK's literally arresting 12,000 people for memes online. Even if you possess a meme on your phone that you never posted, you can be arrested for that. It's insane. Where the rest of the world's kind of going, the United States is kind of that last shining light, and hopefully that light begins to expand and other countries start to adopt. I know Trump and JD Vance are trying to put pressure on other countries. Me and Nat currently now live in Mexico. We had to flee Canada because a lot of the things we're saying here and now we wouldn't be able to say there. And even though there is speech laws and there are draconian laws here in Mexico too, it's very hard for them to implement it the same way they do in countries like the EU, UK, and Canada.
And well, Adam might disagree with you a little bit on the US because he says the USA is being honey-dicked, pardon my language, but it is still going to be a surveillance state through Stellantis. Not only through Stellantis, but also I'd be very wary of Larry Ellison, who has these crazy ideas, has been whispering in Trump's ear, but at the same time, he is doing something good for the media entertainment complex, so I would give him props for that. But also the ideas he has regarding digital ID and digital currency are still crazy.
Well, yeah, and it's definitely going to be a surveillance state in America as well. But if you look around every country around the world right now, America still has the best free speech laws, so at least you're able to still speak. They're going to surveil you en masse. They've been doing it since the Patriot Act. They're continuing to do it. What were you going to say?
No, and since before.
Yeah, and since before. That being said, the good thing that's happening is there was the fight that happened against woke, and a lot of that had to do with speech and putting guardrails on speech and trying to implement hate speech laws. They weren't able to do it. And now we're seeing people like Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro wanting to put speech laws in through the conservative movement. But the good thing about the conservative movement, the base of the movement, and the young people are really standing up to them and saying, no, we want debate, we want free speech. And even though everybody knows you're still going to surveil us, we want the right to say what we're going to say.
And Adam says gold in January was 3,000. Now it is 5,900 in Canada. He is Canadian, he says. And then he said, yes, Bill C8, Bill C9, Bill C2, Bill C63.
They keep putting these bills in. They keep getting knocked down, and then they just rewrite them even more authoritarian up in Canada, and then trying to pass them off as something new. And with Mark Carney, they're about to make a majority government, which is absolutely insane the way he's trying to do that. If he does that, I think the Alberta separatist movement is going to have major legs, and I hope Alberta separates at that point.
And Adam also says, I still agree with your logical views. So thank you.
Okay, we got one more story or two more stories?
Two more.
Okay, two more stories here.
This one's longer. So this is from Wall Street Apes. The U.S. government experimented on Americans without their consent, giving them radiation.
Yeah, and you were talking about surveillance. The U.S. government has not only been involved in surveillance for a very long time of its own population, but they have run massive experiments on their population. Mm-hmm. So I know this is a little bit an older of an example that's just now coming to light because of declassified documents, but they were running it during the jibby jab era. We can see the massive psyops they're trying to run through the internet, through AI and other things. So at least the general public's kind of aware they're being experimented on, so that hopefully they can take preventative measures. But I kind of brought this article up just to remember what even a government that protects free speech laws has done to their people.
Tonight, we're continuing to uncover an era of human experiments with author of the Plutonium Files, Eileen Wellsome. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who stumbled upon a footnote that cracked open a dark secret. The U.S. government experimented on at least 18 Americans without their consent, injecting them with radioactive plutonium. Some of them simply trying to get their bones set after a car accident or trying to get help after being injured on the job. Instead, turned into human test subjects. And now she's talking about the aftermath of publishing that bombshell report and how it opened the floodgates to the discovery of egregious human experimentation at the hands of the government.
And we know during the MK Ultra era, there was tons of experiments run on American citizens, and they went up to Canada, ran experiments on Canadian citizens in conjunction with the Canadian government because they didn't want to do it on their own soil. They were running experiments through implanted chips on people in the Philippines well over 15 years ago now. I mean, the amount of experimentations that are done in private that just come to light years later is absolutely insane.
From children, some of them orphans, fed radioactive oatmeal in Massachusetts, to pregnant women given radioactive cocktails at top hospitals in Tennessee and California. And now horrifying tests in Cincinnati, with at least 88 patients given massive doses of radiation, some of them dying within days. Revealed in a brand new episode of my podcast, The Truth of the Matter. Here's part of our brand new conversation detailing the effects of this horrific human experimentation.
It was a really, really terrible experiment. These were about 80 to 90 people living in Cincinnati, mostly African American, mostly poor, who were given whole body irradiation in the basement of Cincinnati General Hospital. Many of them had, most of them, I should say, had cancer, but many of them had cancers that were not advanced. In other words, they were working, they were walking, they were, baking cakes, living their lives, and they were given this irradiation.
Okay, that's good.
And they died with.
Yeah, the point of this is you can't trust any government. So even if you think this government's good or that government's good, I know I talk a lot of good things about Trump very often and his administration. It's only because the previous administration was so outwardly egregious. It's good to have at least some freedoms back, but it's only a matter of time before Trump starts to consolidate power, and we need to keep a watchful eye even on his administration. And when he goes the wrong direction, his base really needs to speak up. Like when it came to the jibby jab, he didn't change his views on that until he was booed over and over again at countless rallies.
And Adam says, unfortunately, most fly through life with blinders on. The true issues that affect their lives, CBC, CTV, Global, ABC, are all FIOP.
Canada is just on a completely another level. The level of propaganda they have, and it's government paid, and it's just out there for the general public to see. The fact that people don't understand that they're being indoctrinated every night when they tune into CTV is absolutely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go into the last story of the day. I had quite a bit of stories today.
Speaking of King Charles, now from Disclosed TV, Prince William at the COP30 Climate Summit, the melting of the polarized loss of the Amazon, the disruption of ocean currents, these are not distant threats. They are fast approaching and they will affect every one of us no matter where we live. And they're also using climate, and we have done a few stories about it, to spray aerosols just all over the UK with the permission of the UK government, but not the consent of the people, without actually telling or testing what these aerosolized substances even are.
Well, I think that's the least of it, because we covered on this channel about 4 times now. We've gone back to the same story every time it pops up in the news, but the UK government was working with Bill Gates to block out the sun. The UK doesn't get enough sun to begin with. That is going to be absolutely devastating for farmers, for crops. Who knows the mass implications of that, not just for the UK, but globally. If they start playing with the weather in one or two countries, it could have mass implications for countries worldwide or globally. This COP30 summit is an absolute joke. The people in Brazil rioted. Hundreds of people died before they were able to get things under control. That being said, these global governance and people like Mark Carney up in Canada are sticking to the line. Their whole economic plan is supposed to kind of revolve around climate change, carbon credits, carbon capture, and it's falling apart because Donald Trump is throwing a huge monkey wrench in that. That being said, Trump's only in office for 3 or 4 years, and just last week when they had those elections, it was a huge blue wave. I understand that was in blue states, but even if you look at the votes that came back, more people voted in favor of blue senators that in this election than the last one that happened before that in that same state. So Trump's going to really have to deliver on a lot more of his promises if they want to get J.D. Vance or somebody else into office there.
Let's see what Prince William says.
And he's looking old now.
William?
Yeah.
Yes.
I grew up with my father, the king, talking about the power of nature and the importance of harmony in the natural world, a subject he has championed for over 5 decades. It's a privilege to also represent him here today, as well as everyone else who has championed this cause for so many years. All of us here today understand that we are edging dangerously close to the Earth's critical tipping points, thresholds beyond which the natural systems we depend on may begin to unravel.
Pause it. And he's saying may begin to unravel. And we seen Bill Gates the other day completely change his stance on climate change. I mean, Donald Trump's kind of pulling the rug out from under these people. And it's not to say we don't care about the environment, but putting the environment above humanity in this suicidal cult they're creating is absolutely ridiculous. Demanding $1.3 trillion from each country is absolutely ridiculous. They're trying to favor certain countries while they empower other countries and other people.
The melting of polar ice, the loss of the Amazon, the disruption of ocean currents. These are not distant threats. They are fast approaching and will affect every one of us, no matter where we live. I grew up with...
And I do think sea levels could rise along the coast, but I don't think it has to do with climate change. I think it has to do with more of a polar shift. So if you do see sea levels rise, I'm sure they're going to blame climate change, but I think a lot more of it will have to do with a polar shift, which is already starting to kind of occur.
And Adam says, we need to find our commonality with the false lines and identify the true threats.
Yeah,
True threats are the people telling the lies.
I mean, it's tough. Like everybody from every angle is just trying to capture power at this point. They're running headfirst into a global government, whether it's the Vatican, whether it's the EU, whether it's the UN, the WHO. I mean, all these countries are working in coordinated effort with each other. Only recently, with the rise of Donald Trump, Hungarian leaders, El Salvador, Argentina, you're seeing them push back. But even amongst them, those countries, you're starting to see corruption. We've seen 3 corruption scandals with Milei. I like Milei, but I'm not scared to point out his corruption scandals. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's it for today's episode. It was really long. I couldn't believe I actually pulled that many articles for today. If you're not subscribed, please do so. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. And Nat, thanks for helping me. That was a lot of articles today.
And also thank you so much to Adam and Walker for all your comments. For now, we do read them all, so we'd like you to join in on the conversation. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers so we can monetize. Why lie about it? Adam says they are aligned and trying to segregate us. Exactly. Yeah. And that's why we need to stay together and keep the conversation and the debate going while we still can.
Well, we also have to realize big money's going to come into every single movement, and you see it coming into the conservative movement now, and that's why they're trying to bring censorship into it. Mm-hmm. So it's very important, even within your own movement, you call out bad behavior when it kind of happens, whether that's censorship or corruption when it comes to jibby jabs or Bitcoin scandals. So.
And Adam says, I will be following. Thanks, you too. And everybody else, follow Adam's example. Subscribe. Have a great night.
Rest of your day.
Rest of your night. Goodbye.